Those are clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for another week of assessing the insanity that's unfolding around us. It's getting harder and harder to keep track as things unravel. And it seems like a broken record every week, because every week we have more engineered snowstorms, more new names. Now we have Winter Storm Maximus this week. We had Winter Storm Hercules at the first of the year. And all this theater should be really, really obvious to people that, you know, this is an orchestrated campaign to paint a certain picture that's anything but accurate or true. This week, I think everybody has seen, or most that are looking anyway, have seen the attention on the snow that certainly does not behave as snow should behave. And we've been discussing, talking, and trying to disclose the chemical nucleated snow for a long time. It's good that now there is much more attention on it. In California, they broke the high pressure down for a few days, and they allowed some moisture to move across us, not to fall on us, but to move across us. So here in Northern California, where we used to get, in my location, it was not uncommon to get 10 inches of rain in a storm. We got about 1/10 of an inch of rain. And the Weather Channel paid, I don't even have the words for these guys. I mean, you know, their complete lack of any human honor is beyond comprehension, and they stand up there and act like that this is, you know, put a dent in the drought. It wasn't even enough to hardly wet the surface of the ground, and so they create the illusion that things aren't quite so bad in California when nothing changed, and then they immediately put the ridge is back in place now, so they can continue their succession of artificially engineered snowstorms. And of course, then we have the media coming out in their immediate attempt to quote-unquote debunk the conspiracy theorists on the snow. And here's what it should come down to for people. Meteorologists and media are accomplices in a crime of unimaginable proportion, and people should look at it in this way. It's not excusable what they're doing. And when this crime becomes common knowledge, these people should be tried as criminals. They should be tried in a court of law as criminals for their criminal negligence. That's the minimum term we can put on meteorologists that will toe the line for the power structure no matter what, that will lie about events that are clearly unnatural and paint them as natural. I'm reading right now from another Rothschild's power structure-owned source of weather, AccuWeather.com. The Internet exploded this week over a video of some very controversial snow that doesn't appear to melt when held to a lighter. The snow which is shown being taken from the backyard of in Michigan never forms a puddle of water despite being exposed to a source of intense heat. Though the creator of this video, among others, has linked the phenomena to, quote, chemtrails conspiracy theory, the same talking points that we see from mainstream media again and again and again. No word of geoengineering, no word of climate engineering, of course, because that would be the hard science. So there's a scientific reason for why the snow seemingly disappears while an ice cube under the same conditions forms a puddle. But there are elements in this equation that are so far beyond explanation with any other set of data besides being chemically nucleated that you can't explain this phenomenon any other way. We've seen snow here in the Pacific Northwest sit on the ground for a week to 10 days at far above freezing temperatures. No puddle forms below that snow either. I had ice, as I've mentioned before, on ponds in Northern California. I had ice sit on 40-degree water with temperatures of above 40 at night and about 65 in the daytime. It sat there for 2.5 weeks. How the hell is that possible? And so we know what's in this material. We know what's in some of it. And we know it's packed with aluminum. We know it's packed with barium. I just saw a report that indicates perhaps boride. And we know that the ability of this material to nucleate at far above freezing temperatures is seen again and again and again. And this is the creation of these artificial snowstorms is a result of this chemical nucleation. Too much breathing chemical stuff. I got a little frog in my throat. But so we see this last week. We've had, again, the snow in Florida that we predicted, while the south of Florida still remains in the mid-80s. We had the warmest Alaska on record. Just posted an article, new GIS maps the temperatures, a globe that shows the actual current temperature readings that should make a starkly clear picture of how much engineering effort is being focused on North America right now, while much of the rest of the planet is in meltdown. And people need to look past the headlines. So many people can't seem to get past the images are so strong when you see this snow coming down, even no matter it's chemical or that you throw a rock and you're in 80-degree swimsuit weather. People have to get past these images in their mind and realize that's just a very localized picture in a comparison to the whole global situation. And so right now, again, although we just had the snow in New Orleans and snow in Florida, now it's raining at the Great Lakes. There's the normal line we see between this subtropical moisture that's flowing up basically from the Gulf of Mexico, and now it's clear up to the Great Lakes again with rain, and there'll be an ice storm boundary layer between the precipitation and where they're nucleating it to create the snow, and a lot of this transition zone area where this material hits the ground before it sets up. So now it's perfectly normal. I mean, because it's onset over a couple of years, now it's perfectly normal to have a big ice storm in between the warm side of winter storms and the cold side. This is all incredible insanity. It's not normal to have a warm side and a cold side to winter storms. One side has tornadoes and thunder showers, the other side has chemically nucleated snow. It's ridiculous. So thankfully people are waking up, but back to the meteorologists, back to the Weather Channel meteorologists, the AccuWeather people, mainstream media. They are literally accomplices in a crime by helping to hide it. And again, these people should be brought out into the open. And when such statements are made by, like, the meteorologists on AccuWeather, these people their contacts should be found and put out there for the general public. Their statements should be found and put out for the general public, so that we can keep a record of who they are, what they said, so that when these programs are out in the open, that these people can be held responsible, because they need to be held responsible to a degree, just like those who are perpetrating these programs. So again, the winter storm parade continues, the drought in California continues, the meltdown of planet Earth continues, and I don't care how much resistance I get with that premise. So many people want to pound the global cooling drum, and that is not helping our cause right now to take that tack. So I hope people look at the bigger picture, and it will help them understand the degree of geoengineering that's going on. If they understood the bigger picture, they would understand the degree to which the climate is being engineered, and they would also stand on solid ground and have a uniform message that would help unite those in academia that are currently biting their lip. And I had an interview yesterday with Greenpeace's top scientist, And he, by the end of the show, certainly he seemed he was being disingenuous to me, that I can't fathom how Greenpeace's top scientists could not know this is going on. I can't buy it. I just can't buy it. So with all due respect, I mean, he's a very respectable individual. I mean, his demeanor, I certainly appreciate his calm, professional mannerism, but that doesn't change the fact that this is going on and they are not acknowledging it. By the end of the show, he seemed to concede that perhaps these quote experiments are going on. They're not experiments, they're fully deployed, but this show will post on GeoEngineering Watch. People can make up their minds for themselves, but holding these people accountable, environmental groups, meteorologists, mainstream media, those that are ignoring this issue, and now that it becomes harder to hide, they will be more tenacious in their attempt to hide it. So with that in mind, Richard, you saw the artificial snow articles everywhere. Now we see mainstream media. We don't have Russ with us, by the way. We're going to be without Russ for a couple weeks, and I won't be here next weekend either because I have the conference in LA, so we'll have to, Richard can carry that, maybe with a guest or something, but anyway, Richard, your take on the snow situation, I don't know how much you've looked at it and examined it, and also your perspective on mainstream media's immediate attempt to try to quote-unquote debunk this and hide it.
Well, yeah, I think you gave a great description of many aspects of what the problem is, and in a way, the entire problem represented by geoengineering or chemtrails or the spraying, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter, is really a character problem. Because if there weren't so many individuals, especially in high positions, willing to do or say anything for enough money, then nobody would be spraying. So in a way, it's completely the fact that, the character of society has just really degenerated to the point where I think the scientists are happy to be so specialized that they can claim not to know anything except for their own tiny area of calculations and know that they're doing that right, but completely out of context, and it's not their department. As an old Tom Lehrer record used to say, some World War II rocket scientist would say, once the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? It's not my department, says Werner von Braun. I remember listening to that record with my parents, and it's the same way with modern academia, because whatever is connected to what they're doing is simply not their department. And if you couple that understanding, which is completely erroneous compared to real life and nature, with the willingness to change what you say for money, then you get a lot of serious problems, one of which is geoengineering. I don't know how to fix that right away. I think it's a real deep character problem that's widespread. And as far as accountability goes, the first accountability should be to themselves. That's not happening. So legal accountability, similar to Nuremberg trials and things like that, which I think would be quite appropriate, except a lot of people were gotten off at Nuremberg by the governments. But that sort of thing would be great.
Follow through on that, because in Nuremberg, what happened? And I know those scientists went to various countries and so forth, and they were all... Yeah, go ahead.
The public has such a skewed version of history thanks to modern education, whose main purpose now is to make sure that nobody knows anything or understands what it means. But the public has been taught that the Nuremberg trials held all the Nazis accountable and, probably executed almost all of them and put the rest in prison. That's completely false. It was just theater. There were a few people who probably didn't have very high inside standing who were allowed to take the fall, but the vast majority of really knowledgeable scientists with the character where they're willing to kill anybody for money, those were immediately recruited by the U.S. and other countries. In huge numbers, way more than got in trouble at Nuremberg. And if you want to have a real Nuremberg type trial, you can't have that kind of thing going on, because most of the people on trial would be connected to or inside of governments. So if that was really thoroughly done, there'd be no governments left to get them all off. I'd love to see that happen. I wish that there'd be more interest on the part of attorneys and legal people now to be really putting all their energy to see what could be put together to make legal challenges to so many of the massive crimes, which are mostly backed by government, especially ours, it's not really ours, but the one that's taken over in America that has nothing to do with parties whatsoever, that runs this whole power structure that supports massive programs like geoengineering and like the media. They're all backed by the same cartel. And if there was anybody that could really brilliantly work on legal challenges to slow that down or stop it, that would be a great use of a legal education, and I'd like to see more people looking at that. As far as the plastic snow goes, yeah, I've gotten into that in detail, and in addition to it being chemically nucleated and not melting, and I've seen the debunking too, it's just ridiculous. Something true can't really be debunked if you're paying attention. What concerns me most in this latest version, like the snow in Georgia, is the fact that when you burn it or try to melt it, it smells distinctly like burning plastic. And that is not just the metals. There are other major ingredients in that fake snow that pose a huge danger to the whole ecosystem once they get into the soil and are likely to show up in the food chain. And I think that's pretty serious.
Can't not show up in the food chain. Can't not. It will. And the power structures, they're pushed into a corner, and they're being pushed into a corner. This lump is getting impossible to hide. They're ever more desperate to hide it. And as you said with the character flaws, and I completely agree with that, it's not just those at the top with the character flaws, all the way down the ladder, including the local meteorologists, which we've had a number of very reputable people from our community go into our local Channel 7 station here and try to talk to the head meteorologist, try to talk to one of the head newscasters. They literally get the door slammed in their fingers.
Right.
And this is the sort of response that even those at a local level who have tried to take a certain position to protect their job, perhaps, or to protect their own ideology, to try to shield themselves from fear that, oh my God, could this really be going on? Whatever the reason, it makes no difference. These people have a responsibility to tell the truth to the public, and they are absolutely criminally ignoring that responsibility. And I think, again, everybody who toes the line for the power structure on this should be kept account of, so that when this is out in the open, they can explain that they can explain why they were accomplices in this crime and perhaps be held criminally liable for their, at minimum, criminal negligence. So,
right.
Again, that's where we're heading.
The whole definition of accountability has completely changed culturally. And not only in this country, but this country's a great example of it. And a lot of it is also engineered, just like the snow, because of the programming that leads people in the direction of dropping good character on many of the media. That's a long subject in itself. But the thing is that now people define accountability to a large extent as A, what you might get caught for, or B, what you'll be paid for. And they just don't get it that they're accountable on any other level, to themselves to be the best version of themselves they can possibly be. That would be some kind of conspiracy theory or fairy tale. And the reality is, who's going to pay you and how much can you get by lying? And I think that's pretty unfortunate. And that's, in a way, that's the entire basis of geoengineering.
It is. And as the power structure gets pushed further into a corner, as this particular activity, which has affected horrifically the entire planet, every living thing on the planet, as these programs are exposed, it will change the complexion of everything we face. And the power structure knows this, and I believe, again, right now they're frantically trying to hide the magnitude of climate unraveling so they can finish their preparations. And I think we're in a race to the intersection right now to expose these programs before they decide to lower the hammer, false flag event, whatever it is they're going to do, because it's getting hard to hide that it just snowed in New Orleans, and right now it's raining in Detroit, right now. And you throw a rock, you go from thunderstorms to chemically nucleated snow. But it's raining in Detroit as I speak right now, and it just got done snowing in New Orleans. Warmest January on record in Alaska. Temperatures yesterday, we got some reports as much as 67 degrees. There's places in the Arctic that are 20 degrees C above normal. That's about 35 degrees Fahrenheit. above normal. You can only push this cold air around so much and so long. I just posted, again, a map that I hope everybody takes a look at, because this map is very important. It was done by Sam Crana with Arctic News. And although I am obviously in complete disagreement with the Arctic Methane Emergency Group and their inquiry into geoengineering as if it's not already happening, that's just a blatant lie that they don't know this. But it doesn't change the temperature data that no one argues with. You can't find any credible source of data to argue the temperature shown in this map. And the post I put up is called Climate Engineering, a Toxic Deception. It's a toxic deception because if you look at that map and you look at how completely engineered North America is to create these temperature cool downs that Americans can't get the image out of their head. It has to be cold everywhere because it's cold where they're at. It's not cold everywhere. And if this is my attempt in posting this map is to point out where the massive geoengineering concentration is really occurring. And the map couldn't have more clarity as far as pointing this out. So anyway,
Dane, in addition to being cold, I understand that because it's been cold here too. But even if it's freezing cold, if that freezing cold has toxic chemical components in it, that's an incredible emergency. Even if it's going to stay cold and it's going to stay poisoned cold, it's still going to kill everything. And, the unity that you were saying that we should have, that should be there already. It doesn't matter what the temperature is if you're being poisoned. And on one hand, it looks like they're trying to hide things, but on the other hand, they think the public is really stupid and they don't have to hide it, because if you dump plastic snow on a place like Georgia, you're assuming that the people are so stupid they can't figure it out. And so, even if it's cold, it doesn't help if the snow has become plastic. That's an immediate emergency. I mean, that should have everybody out, in a top level priority to catch the criminals, the terrorists who are doing that.
Well, it matters in this sense too. It's not that is an emergency. I agree, but in orchestrating these cold events, well, one, this map is to point out where the concentration of geoengineering is occurring, and I think that should matter to people so that they know that they are in the quote-unquote target areas. And two, these cold events alone have caused, how many fatalities have they caused? We don't know. It certainly killed 100,000 cattle in South Dakota. So
right.
How many traffic accidents, how many other?
If that's just natural, though, you just have to accept it. But if it's being caused, man-made caused, that's a whole different issue.
And I just posted the PowerPoint that I did 2 weeks ago in Northern California. It's called Climate Engineering, Weather Warfare, and the Collapse of Civilization. And in this, I outlined and I showed the maps of South Dakota at the time that snowstorm occurred. And anybody who can't see clearly that it's a rational impossibility that you could have cattle dying in South Dakota with snow falling at 44 degrees. And this map shows that you can't find these maps anymore because they pulled them all now. So, but I have the copies there in that PowerPoint. And at the same time these cattle were dying in South Dakota, you had 85 degrees in rain in Chicago, 85, 90 in Kansas City. So, again, that their ability to lower temperatures down temporarily, a cool layer at the ground with this incredibly cold surface of chemical reactive material, and this sublimation is what the meteorologists try to claim that snow always sublimates completely, which means it turns from a solid state to a gas without liquefying. Now, snow does do this under certain conditions. A lot of snow evaporates straight into the atmosphere and doesn't really hit the ground under certain conditions, but not when you put it at room temperature on top of a wood stove. It should not sublimate like that. Absolutely should not sublimate. And we know, again, from the ponds I described, from the snow sitting on the ground here. So when these meteorologists toe the line for the power structure again, we need to hold them accountable. And hey, Jules, if we can give the call-in number, I don't have that here, or if Richard can give that.
I can do that.
Okay.
That's 719-718-8296. And when callers call in, I want to make one request. I mean, it's not a real fancy call-in system, so please either keep yourself muted or wait to talk until we call on the specific caller by your phone number, and that way we don't get multiple people talking at the same time. So that number again, you're welcome to call in and discuss these things. 717-718-8296, and we'll talk to you in order here.
So, Richard, you said you're colder there. How cold are you now?
Well, it's been really pleasantly mild, and now suddenly the temperature's dropping. It's supposed to be down to 21 in the next few days. And it's been in
for the low?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Dane.
21 for the low temperature or the high?
Yeah, 21 at night. It's been 65 in the daytime and about 50 at night.
And that's substantially above average for Sedona.
Yeah, I think that's above average, but 21's a little bit below. It's the severity of the sudden change that I'm really talking about.
But that's again what we see. That's going to increasingly be the norm. Back to the term climate change. We've talked about that. Why they implemented that term in the late 90s, so that people would be conditioned into thinking these radical fluctuations were somehow a normal part of the changes occurring. Anything but. So, this is what people should keep in the front of their mind, that the system is being pushed and pulled so radically right now that it's anybody's guess when it breaks completely. And it appears the geoengineers are throwing absolutely everything they can at trying to paint a certain picture right now. I mean, if anybody has Weather Channel, I encourage them to watch it and just try to digest the total theater on there and the absolute dishonorable behavior of everybody in that station, on that channel. I'm glad Dish dropped them like a rock. I hope Direct dropped them. I hope Dish drops Weather Channel as well. And I hope there's some fighting in the power structure that increases as we go through time, because now people within the power structure are being hurt. They're being hurt by these programs. So, I think we're going to see some pushback. And we've had also, and we're going to post this on GeoEngineering Watch, we had a letter from Valerie, gosh, I can't remember her first name right now, but it's from United States Senator Dane Heller. And this is the best letter we've gotten back yet, and we want to follow up on this. And there's other wheels turning in the political arena here with our cause. But it says, Dear Valerie, thank you for contacting me with your concerns about geoengineering. Again, this is from Senator Dane Heller from Nevada. I appreciate your thoughts on this issue and welcome the opportunity to respond. I understand your concerns about geoengineering and the risks it poses on health and welfare of the environment and the public. As you know, geoengineering is the deliberate modification of the planet's environment by the additional or subtraction of a resource or energy input on a massive scale. Some of these practices include the dispersal of chemicals into the environment. You may be interested to know that the Safe Chemicals Act, S696, was introduced to require safety testing of all industrial chemicals. Under this act, the chemical producers would be required to prove that chemicals are safe in order to stay on the market. Currently, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, can only call for safety testing after evidence surfaces demonstrating a chemical is dangerous. S696 was introduced on April 10, 2013. It was referenced to the Committee on the Environment and Public Works and is awaiting further action. So it's still stalled, apparently. It's pretty profound to imagine that we don't have such laws in place, but the whole system, as I've said before, is designed not to show the mountain of toxic poison that's raining down on all of us. But at least this is from Mr. Heller. I salute him for taking the steps he did in this letter, and we're going to try to get other congressmen to step up to the plate as well. But I think we're getting closer than we realize to... Go ahead.
Dane, I just have to mention that I reversed part of the phone number unintentionally. It's supposed to be 718 first, and then 717-8296. 718 is the area code, and then it's 717-8296. Sorry about that, and sorry to interrupt you, Dane.
No worries. But this letter certainly is a step forward from anything we've seen so far from the political arena, which is total denial. So I salute Mr. Heller, and we will try to hopefully follow that up with other congressional reps to start stepping up to the plate either. We're trying to also connect some of these people who seem to have the backbone to take some sort of a stance. So we'll continue to try to connect them. That letter, Richard, your thoughts?
Well, fortunately, even within the government structure, I've noticed that they haven't been able to totally prevent a few honest type people from getting in, even at the federal level in Congress and the Senate. There are only a few, but they do exist. And when they have interviews on the media, usually the media tries to make them look like complete, fools or really idiotic people, but they're not. And hopefully if the viewers can pay attention, it's really not hard to see through it. But the main power structure of the media is, like you say, designed to make sure that the truth is not given to the public. And part of our job is to figure out ways to counteract that.
Yeah, not just the media, but agencies like the EPA and so forth. People have been lulled into believing that these agencies exist to disclose any hazard to the public health, and in fact, the opposite is the truth. They exist to hide.
The agencies are almost like media with guns. I mean, they give disinformation just like the so-called news does, and the Weather Channel, people like that. But they also can make regulations that are not even laws and enforce those at gunpoint, which is an interesting system. It has nothing to do with the system that America was designed for. It's not constitutional. It's not legal. And they just do it anyway because they figure that nobody can do anything about it.
Well, at the point we're at now, if this tide of awareness can be fueled and continue, so that people understand there is no natural weather, that the entire system is being completely toxically disrupted, and the ramifications are grave and immediate for all of us. Grave and immediate. So people, I can only hope and pray, prioritize this issue. And I still have people coming to me and referring to this issue as my issue, as if it's not their issue as well. And that's astounding to me. And I confront people when they make that statement to me, because in what way is this only my issue? So I hope that people look at this as I believe they should. This is a very real and a very immediate fight for life on planet Earth.
Dane, I want to make another point about the legal side of the whole thing, if I can.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is that government and agency officials and other people act just completely disregarding law, because when a law is unconstitutional, it's basically not a law at all. It's null and void. And there is a mechanism within the structure of government that includes juries, where if somebody is accused of a law and they broke the law, but the law goes against their basic rights, then they can vote not guilty and nobody can argue with that. The person goes free, as they should. States and counties and cities can also nullify unconstitutional laws and just say, this law is illegitimate, we're not going to follow it. And I noticed that within the federal regulations in the federal law are statutes that say that it's legal for government to carry out lethal experiments on its own population as long as they're for science or a few other wide-ranging purposes like that, which they always can be. So they are actually following that kind of law by spraying us with poisons and destroying the normal climate. However, those laws are unconstitutional, and therefore they have no force or effect. And what I would like to see in terms of a legal effort, which should be started right now by anybody with the ability to operate in the legal field, is that the whole, for example, geoengineering, among many other activities of the federal government, is completely illegal, even though they have written laws allowing them to do lethal experiments on the people. Those laws are unconstitutional. So it would be nice to see a group come together with one motive, in other words, to stop these activities, and figure out how to get an injunction to find a judge somewhere that's not already paid off to lie, just like the news people do, and to get something in motion to make it difficult to continue this program on a big scale. I think that's possible.
Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
No, I just think it's possible, and people shouldn't assume that this is beyond the range of something that could be done.
No, it can be done. It must be done. And I think as we see the water coming over the deck of the ship, which it's doing now, I think we'll see a lot of the rats start to leave the ship. and people who have towed the line for the collective insanity, thinking they were somehow going to be immune from this, as you've correctly stated many times in the past. They're not immune. They're not in the inside circle. And there's no inside circle here, really, because as the Greenpeace scientist mentioned yesterday on the radio show, I brought up that there would be winners and losers with geoengineering. Well, again, he's basically parroting the official narrative. There is no winners with geoengineering. There's only losers. And then he went on with the official narration to say that geoengineering, if they were to implement it, again, as if they haven't many decades ago, it would cause drought. And he named a lot of places. He named Asia, Africa, South America, but not the U.S., because then someone in the U.S. might get concerned that it might affect them. So, why would it not cause drought in the U.S.?
Yeah, I want to make a comment on this kind of crazy reasoning that high-level scientists are typically using now. This is a psychological program that's been put in place over hundreds of years at least, and one of the outcomes now is that science itself has been completely redefined. Science used to be observation of nature and of yourself and drawing conclusions from pattern recognition and analysis of what you see going on. That's not science anymore. Now science is taking acceptable beliefs, primarily in the peer-reviewed journals of certain kinds, and rearranging the wording, paraphrasing or copying what has been said that's acceptable and saying it like it's your idea with that reference. There's nothing, if you see something happening in front of your face and it's contrary to what's written in the acceptable articles, then it doesn't exist. And the reality is whatever the articles say. And I can't say how important that change has become. I mean, I'm right in the middle of it in the academic world. And you literally cannot get these people to see what they're looking at because now they believe sincerely that reality is defined in the acceptable references that they're allowed to cite.
The power of that sort of conditioning is absolutely profound. I agree with you completely. And when we see, I want to use 9/11 as an example, or even the Kennedy assassination. Let's go back a little further. Then I don't know whether some of us just didn't have enough fluoride, but I think I've shared this before. But when I saw Kennedy get shot, it was 8 years after the fact, but I was about 8 years old. His head flies backward, and the immediate thought was, how can you get shot from behind and your head flies backward? And yet my parents, both of them, were completely adamant about the official narrative on that. So then let's advance to 9/11. I mean, when you have Building 7 collapsing at free fall speed from some office furniture burning, I mean, if that was the case, people in high-rises should be petrified that if someone drops a cigarette, the whole building's going to collapse to the ground. If a few chairs and couches start to burn. It's ludicrous. In fact, in that case, so ludicrous that the 9/11 Commission, the whole Commission report, not a single sentence on Building 7 collapsing at free fall speed from office furniture burning, because there was no explanation, no matter how ludicrous, for that. So, again, and even to this day, how many people will toe the narrative? You're just a conspiracy theorist if you think that the official story is not true. The plane that went down, I think, Pennsylvania, there was not a shred of wreckage at that site. The Pentagon, not a shred of wreckage. How is that possible? How could a passenger jetliner hit a building and there was nothing there? I've seen the films. So, again, it's absolutely amazing what people will buy or believe for the reasons that you mentioned, Richard, that if it's not in the official manual, if it's not in the official newspaper, the official media source, it simply is not real or not valid.
It's amazing that this mentality has spread right down to the local level in thousands of towns and counties and cities all over the country. I occasionally try to communicate with somebody in a position locally in the government or in the media, and I went one day when the spraying was just really bad, and I was extremely frustrated that with all my care to eat organic food and things like that, I had to be breathing garbage. It didn't make a lot of sense. So and these trails were so obvious. There were just clouds of pollution coming out of these planes in the sky. And so I called up one of the main reporters at the local newspaper here, and I thought, God, this has got to be really easy because it's so obvious you can just open your eyes and look. This was a really dumb assumption on my part. I had not talked to this kind of person for a while. And he was very, very nice, polite person, great social skills, and just explained to me very, patiently, because I obviously was having trouble understanding reality, that, he would be happy to do a story on the spraying, but it would really be a lot of trouble. It would take a lot of time, and mainly because the reason it would be so hard is because if the government has not verified that something is real, how can you possibly prove it? And you can't even find out if it's really happening unless they've released something that verifies it from their scientists. So even if you're looking at it, it's probably something else.
Well, the difference we have in this scenario we face today is that there will be no denying this for much longer. This is the term I've used again and again, is the lump won't fit under the rug. That term's accurate. And that's really starting to happen now by the day. I mean, even this recent wake up on the snow event, and I thought Greg Palin did a really good job of, he's a former congressional candidate from Georgia. I thought he did a very good job of a demonstration that it's pretty hard to argue with, where he puts a ball of scraped ice, which is comparable in composition to what he pulled out of his yard, and that scraped ice started to melt in about 10 seconds, rapidly. The other ball, about the same size and density, took 6 minutes before the first drop fell. So we're not talking about small differences here. We're talking about completely profound differences. So, and we've observed this, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show. So, my regard for Greg for having done that, which is a test I use in the article I put together on this subject. But, again, they are so desperate right now that they are nucleating about everything we see on the radar, as hard and heavy as they can. And even then, I mean, anybody who thinks that it's normal to be snowing in half of Florida and 85 in the other half, or snowing in Florida and New Orleans while it's pushing 70 in Alaska, and then a few days later it's raining all the way to the Great Lakes, this should be obvious as hell. And any meteorologist that has enough brain power to walk and chew gum knows something's going on. So it's just, at some level they know. The denial is profound, but at some level they know. And again, I hope people, if we can get the link to the show yesterday with the Greenpeace scientist, I hope they can listen to that and see just his behavior as he keeps trying to refer to these programs as proposals, and that perhaps there should be a moratorium. And just like ETC did, the environmental group ETC from Canada, who knows where their funding is coming from, but they passed a moratorium on geoengineering in 2010, and a lot of activists jumped up and down and said, oh, good, it's over. That couldn't be further from the truth. That quote-unquote moratorium simply provided even more cover for the geoengineers because it took some people out of the fight. And it painted the illusion that these programs weren't going on, which couldn't have been further from the truth. So, again, those in academia that are towing the line for the power structure, in my mind, are criminally liable. And I hope when this comes out that the public treats them as such. And there should be trials, just like the Nuremberg trials, only this time on a scale of justice that would not allow the injustices that happened with Nuremberg.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. I think that definitely has to happen with all of the illegal activity that's threatening, the survival of the whole planet right now, and there's a massive amount of it, and almost all of it is being perpetrated through the governments, primarily this one and many others that are working with it.
And how few people at the top really that are pulling the strings, and everybody downstream just hoping somehow if they ignore reality long enough it will go away. Certainly it's not going to go away, and the totality of what we face is unfolding by the day. But again, it's anybody's guess when a false flag event of some type will unfold. I mean, you certainly considered that too, yes, Richard?
I expect it because it's been a very effective tool up to now for a long time. I mean, even Hitler used that further his own cause when he had the famous bombing of his own building called the Reichstag. It's just an accepted, very effective procedure, and it's worked over and over and over again for the people that are running our country now.
But how many now even realize, for example, that Saddam Hussein had no WMD, that the whole destabilization of the Middle East and even Ukraine, I mean, think about this in Ukraine right now. John Kerry is meeting with the opposition in Ukraine. Would we stand for that in America? If Occupy Wall Street had Vladimir Putin come over and meet with them to try to strategize with them, would we stand for that? I think not. And yet the American public seems content on one distracting event after another. Now, of course, the Super Bowl is a big distraction, and that should be a shocking sign of where we're at. That people can occupy themselves, their time, their focus with something like the Super Bowl, while this kind of stuff is going on, while you have 30-plus countries around the globe descending into total chaos, and at a certain point, you can't stop that tide. You can't, because it just simply has too much momentum, and everything begins to unravel once the links in the chain start dropping off. So let's talk for a few minutes, Richard, about what do we do? And people ask this again and again and again, and I try to say it again and again, but I know it's not being heard, and in the course of trying to cover too many irons in the fire right now on this issue, I want to put more specific data out on this, and I have on my plate right now for I don't know how long I've been trying to finish this simple one-page suggestion sheet, activist suggestion sheet of what you do. But some basic points let's bring up right now again, Richard, that have some idea what you're talking about and verify your talking points. Don't take a headline from here or from there. Look into it, look beneath the surface, and have some basis for whatever conclusion you have. 2, when you pass data on to people, do it in a manner that's constructive and not counterproductive. And look credible. It's important to look credible. When people go out in the streets and do activism work, it's important to look credible. It is. It's just it's the way it is. It's just the way it is. That people don't, or we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but they see the cover first. So look credible, act credible, have credible data, and pass on information in a manner that doesn't put people's defenses up. And those flaming arrows, again, we're seeing a lot of those catch. I mean, even when people reject that information at first, it doesn't mean that it hasn't planted a seed. It has. And now that with the weather completely spinning out of control and the snow situation that's brought a lot of attention to our issue, finally, a lot of seeds are starting to sprout. People realizing, hey, there is something to this, And as the weather fluctuates just unimaginably, it's starting to wake people up. So, again, everybody from their own location. This is the shooting from behind rocks and trees like the colonists did. We don't need to all line up together in some uniform, coordinated fashion, but if we all have our act together, if we all, again, have the credible data and approach it credibly and at a grassroots level, wake up those around us so that they realize the ship is going down, you'll see people start to take action. Those that are capable, once they realize this is it, no ignoring this issue, I think we're going to see at some point an absolute tidal wave of awareness that's going to erupt from this issue, because most know about it now. Even if they're in total denial, they've heard about it.
Yeah, I think also, Dane, strategically speaking, if we're going to be educating the public, it's really important to educate them about what may come as the next step from the authorities when, as you say, this climate destruction becomes obvious. Then at that point, my expectation is for the government to move immediately into a much higher level of implementation of the police state activities in Agenda 21 that will do nothing for the environment but will take away the last remaining vestige of people's freedom and ability to do anything or have any power. And I think if people understand that that's coming, in other words, as soon as the argument is supposedly won about letting people know that this is going on, the power structure is going to move to take advantage of that by saying, we told you that too much freedom leads to this, and we're going to have to regulate what's left of your freedoms in a way that's not going to be good.
And that's
and
going
right
to happen
now,
with...
people aren't looking ahead to that like they should be.
It's going to happen with blinding speed. That's something else people don't realize. I think a lot of people
overnight.
It will.
Yeah.
People are sitting the bench right now thinking, well, I'm kind of busy with this, that, and the other, and I'll get to this when it starts to get really bad. It's bad now. And when they lower the next shoe, that could be it for communication, for the internet availability we have right now. And the infighting still is astounding. I bumped into a prominent local environmentalist yesterday, and gave him data that I had with me, and he certainly seemed concerned about this issue in this case, because a lot of environmentalists are completely in denial of this issue, the biggest organizations of all. But this guy knows, but his response was, well, yeah, and we got to fight those Tea Partiers too, because they're a part of this. Well, actually, locally, I've had the most help from the Tea Party. So for this guy to take that position shows, again, the conditioning that helps divide the House. He properly recognized the Koch brothers as being certainly part of the criminally insane power structure. He's correct on that. But to associate our local Tea Party people who have nothing to do with the Koch brothers and who, I would not be necessarily on the same page with all their views on environmentally. I mean, I think much more concerned about the environment overall, even without geoengineering. But that being said, we have strong common ground. They're good people, they're dedicated, they're organized, and they're helping in this fight tremendously. So why would this guy draw the line in the sand? And then I've heard
part of why he does is because he's being trained that way by the media, who is demonizing the Tea Party specifically because they're the real Tea Party that's not co-opted by government agents. Their whole theme is personal freedom. And you can't have freedom if your environment's destroyed. And there's nothing evil about, wanting to have the theme that the country started on, which was letting you live any way that you want as long as you don't hurt other people. Should be the basis of all the law.
It is. But on that note, I've heard people in the Tea Party do the same thing back toward the, quote, environmentalists, that it's the damn environmentalists, almost blaming the spraying on the environmentalists because they're just trying to take away our access to the wilderness as if there's nothing wrong with the wilderness.
This comes from a superficial way of understanding it, because in the environmental movement, of which I was a really strong part as early as the 1960s, right now, is being used by government as a tool of Agenda 21, and just like they're trying to use global warming before or climate change. And even though the issues are real, climate disruption and environmental concern is real, both of these things are being twisted around and used for tools of oppression by the authorities. And so when the Tea Party people are against environmentalism, this is why. It's because they understand one half of it. They understand the fake environmentalist attitude that puts 15 armed agents where a small brush clearing activity is going on, ready to shoot somebody if they break a regulation. This is the kind of environmentalism they're objecting to, where at the same time there's a real environmental concern that says you're not going to spray the air full of poison. That's legitimate. But both of these are going on, and it takes a little bit of cognitive ability, to quote your fancy wording from before, to understand that it's not just one level. You have to have a little bit of mental awakeness to understand this stuff.
And get past your filters, get past your conditioning. And that's where all ends of this camp need to go. To stand on our common ground, to understand that all is at stake, and to not allow this public media conditioning or mainstream media conditioning to affect the way we filter information, that we can, again, see our common ground, stand on it, and not be influenced into a divided house because of the conditioning we've been exposed to. Because everyone needs to join hands on this now.
Yeah, the environmentalist, the anti-environmentalist sentiment, I totally understand. There's a friend of mine who lives near Jackson, who is the basis of what I just alluded to. He has a bulldozer, and he was clearing some brush along the street for a fire break, and he literally counted 15 armed belligerent agents walking around with a TSA type imperious attitude, ready to take aggressive action if there was any dust generated, because it would be bad for the environment. I mean, this is it's worse than insanity because it's intentionally directed to cut down any kind of free activity.
I've been exposed to some of that. Yeah, I've been exposed to some of that before.
And this is just an excuse for tyranny, whereas the real environmentalism that has nothing to do with Agenda 21 or what the government wants is you want your environment as an integrated part of life on Earth to remain healthy and respected, and that's all.
And trying to burn off undergrowth here, and I've, with my own equipment and so forth, in the preserve that I have had legions of firemen come out in a burn that was completely controlled, done properly, at the right time under the right conditions. I had a complete handle on it, and I've been doing this for many years, but came out, threatened to cite, again, a whole legion of people. At the same time, I've been where they are doing burns on my own equipment, on a D6 Caterpillar, doing habitat restoration, but, asking them why they would burn that day because the conditions were not appropriate, and being basically marginalized as, you're not the expert, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, I do have many years of experience with this. They have their chalkboards and their books, same story we've talked about earlier, and actually on 2 occasions had them start hit mountains on fire on my property, and that I ended up putting out with my dozer while they're trying to figure out what happened. And this is the same sort of mentality that they condemn a person for doing something constructive while they do things, how many times worse. So on the environmental end, again, that disdain that some people feel, in fact, the disdain that the Tea Party feels right now toward many in the environmental community, I frankly feel the same. And no one is more of an environmentalist than me. I've literally blood, sweat, and cried in my forest for years, working day in, day out to try to restore habitat. And I care about every single frog, every single bird. But the bottom line is, if the whole house is burning down and the quote-unquote environmentalists are out mowing the lawn somewhere, that doesn't help. It doesn't work. So I understand that angst toward many that are in that community, but we still can't make any progress if we don't try to reach them with this issue and pull them on board. And the same time with the environmentalist attitude toward the Tea Party, yes, the Koch brothers are bad. What does that have to do with these local people in the Tea Party that are trying desperately to help us expose this critical issue? So people need to join hands, quit, erase the lines in the sand, join hands, and work together toward this one common goal, not a whole array of things, but this one must be dealt with first, and I hope people come to that conclusion.
I'd also like to add that when people are out there educating the public, don't only educate them to your list of talking points or whatever you have backed up by the citations. Educate them on the need to take on an attitude of awareness and being awake and thinking and living responsibly, because that translates into everything. And it does a lot more good than just memorizing one set of talking points or another. That gives the talking points a reason, because you care about the whole quality of life for everybody. And Dane, we have about 2 minutes, so whatever you'd like to wrap up with is great.
I think that point you just made is great, that, to have a reason for your conclusions, not because your peers feel that way, not because you've seen a headline or two that way, not because you're afraid to stand out from the crowd. Have a reason for your conclusions and realize that our honor is the only thing that any of us own. Everything else can be taken from us. So if we don't make that the first and foremost trait that we protect, then we have nothing. We have nothing left. So, again, I hope, as you just stated, Richard, the people
15 seconds.
Do an investigation.
Okay. Yeah, so, I think so too, and we got a lot of potential power among us.
Well, this is, again, for 1 week, we kind of miss Russ. He's the good sign-off on this show normally, but this is another week of GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.